At 20 years old, Chloe Vance watched her mother throw her suitcase into the cold Chicago rain and tell her that if she walked out the door, she was no longer part of the family. Chloe stood on the front steps waiting for someone to stop her. For footsteps behind the door, for her father to say her name, for Marcus to finally choose his sister over their mother. Nothing happened. 8 years later, Patricia Vance would demand a place at Chloe's wedding as though that night had never existed. And when Chloe refused, her mother would turn a private family conflict into a public attack that threatened Chloe's reputation, her business, and the happiest day of her life. What Patricia did not know was that Chloe had kept records of the past. But to understand why she needed them, you had to understand what life inside the Vance family had really been like. Patricia Vance always appeared elegant. Marcus was the pride of the family, and Chloe usually stood at the edge of every photograph with a smile just beautiful enough to keep her mother from feeling embarrassed. Behind those carefully framed pictures was a home where love always came with conditions. Patricia rarely shouted. She did not need to. Silence was one of her favorite punishments. Whenever Chloe did something she disapproved of, Patricia could walk past her for days as though her daughter were invisible. Marcus almost always sided with their mother. Their father learned long ago that avoiding confrontation was easier than challenging Patricia, so Chloe adapted. She spoke more softly, asked for less, apologized first. She grew up believing that if she behaved well enough and needed little enough, one day her mother might love her without making her earn it. The illusion finally collapsed during Chloe's final year of college. Patricia had already begun preparing paperwork for Chloe to continue toward medical school. She spoke about it to friends before Chloe had even agreed. Having a doctor in the family sounded impressive. That was enough for Patricia. But Chloe had been hiding another life. She wanted interior design. She had quietly taken a job at a small architectural studio and spent evenings learning how light changed a room, how proportion created emotion, and how an empty space could become something people remembered. When Patricia discovered the truth, she placed Chloe's papers on the dining table. Cheap dreams always make people pay an expensive price. For most of Chloe's life, a sentence like that would have been enough. This time, it was not. Chloe told her she would not study medicine. She had been accepted for an internship in Seattle. She would work, she would support herself, and she would decide what happened to her own life. Marcus looked down at his phone. Her father turned toward the window. Patricia said nothing for several seconds. Then she walked to the hallway closet and pulled out an old suitcase. She began throwing Chloe's clothes into it. Less than 10 minutes later, the suitcase landed on the front porch. Rain darkened the fabric almost immediately. Patricia opened the door. "If you leave for Seattle, don't come back pretending you're still part of this family." Chloe looked past her mother. Marcus was still there. Her father was still there. Neither moved. Then Chloe stepped outside. The door closed behind her. She remained on the porch longer than she would ever admit to anyone. She kept thinking the lock would turn. It never did. Seattle welcomed her with a cramped, rented room, extra work shifts, cheap dinners, and nights when she fell asleep over unfinished drawings. But Seattle gave her something Chicago never had: permission to fail without being punished. She worked in small studios, accepted assignments other designers ignored, stayed late, learned from every mistake, and slowly built a reputation for understanding spaces other people could not quite solve. 8 years later, Chloe was no longer an intern. She had co-founded a successful design studio involved in one of Seattle's largest lakeside resort developments. Hotels and investors sought the firm's work, and final design approvals on major projects required Chloe's signature. A decision from her could affect contracts worth tens of millions of dollars. Patricia knew almost none of this. She still told people that Chloe decorated houses. That misunderstanding suited Chloe perfectly. She no longer needed her mother to understand who she was. Julian entered Chloe's life after she had learned how to survive alone. He never tried to rescue her. That was part of why she trusted him. When Chloe worried that saying no made her selfish, Julian did not give her speeches about forgiveness. He simply asked why people who loved her required access to every part of her life. With him, Chloe began learning something she had never been taught at home. A boundary did not become cruel simply because someone disliked it. So when Julian proposed, Chloe made one decision before they chose the flowers, the food, or the location. No one from the Vance family would be invited. 3 days before the ceremony, the first message arrived. It came from Marcus. He had barely spoken to Chloe in nearly 8 years. He did not ask how she was. He did not congratulate her. He wrote only, "Mom knows. You'd better be ready to explain yourself when everyone finds out what kind of daughter you really are." Chloe read the message in the sunlit kitchen of the small Seattle home she shared with Julian. 30 cream-colored wedding invitations were spread across the table. Every one had been written by hand. Friends, colleagues, people who had helped Chloe move apartments, sat with her after difficult nights, celebrated her first real contract, and stayed when there was nothing to gain from staying. Not one invitation carried the last name Vance. The wedding would take place at a flower farm outside Seattle. 30 guests, white flowers, no reporters, no extravagant stage, no carefully rehearsed family speeches. Chloe wanted only to walk toward Julian, take his hand, and begin a family where love was not used as leverage. Patricia saw something entirely different: exclusion, humiliation, loss of control. Marcus's message was only the beginning. Soon Chloe's phone filled with messages from aunts and uncles who had not checked on her in years. They called her selfish. They said Patricia had cried herself sick. One relative reminded Chloe that Patricia had given birth to her, as though childbirth created a permanent debt no behavior could erase. No one asked why Chloe had not sent an invitation. No one mentioned the suitcase. No one mentioned the rain. No one asked how a 20-year-old girl had survived after being told never to return. In the Vance family's version of history, Patricia was always the wounded mother. Chloe was always the daughter who owed an apology. That evening, Patricia finally sent a voice message. Her voice sounded weak, fragile. Every sentence seemed to come through tears. She said she had sacrificed her entire life for her children. She said Julian had changed Chloe. She said families had disagreements, but good daughters did not humiliate their mothers in public. Then her voice changed. Just slightly. Enough for Chloe to hear the woman she remembered. "If I don't have an invitation by tomorrow morning, people are going to find out exactly how ungrateful you really are." Chloe sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands went cold. For a few seconds, she was 20 again, standing outside the locked door, trying to decide whether protecting herself made her cruel. Her body remembered Patricia faster than her mind could reason through the threat. She almost called back, almost said there had been a misunderstanding, almost told herself one invitation could not hurt anything. Julian sat beside her. He did not take the phone away. He asked only one question. "If you invite them because you're afraid of what they'll do, is it still your wedding?" Chloe stared at the dark screen. That question exposed something she had spent years trying not to see. Whenever Chloe created a boundary, Patricia called it an attack. Whenever Chloe protected herself, the family called it betrayal. They were not asking Chloe to repair a relationship. They were asking her to return to her assigned role, the obedient daughter. Chloe switched off her phone. She did not argue. She did not defend herself. She did not send an invitation. At 6 o'clock on the morning of her wedding, with the Seattle sky turning pale blue outside the window, Chloe sat in a white robe and opened an email she had written the night before. It contained only 3 lines. "I forgive what happened. But forgiveness does not mean allowing you to continue entering my life. Closing this door is how I protect myself." She read it once, then pressed send. In Chicago, Patricia was having breakfast with Marcus when the notification appeared. She opened the email. "Read it." The tears vanished. The fragile voice disappeared with them. Her fingers tightened around the phone. "She's going to pay for humiliating me." Marcus looked at his mother. For once, he understood exactly what she was angry about. Patricia was not grieving because she had lost access to her daughter. She was furious because Chloe had made a decision Patricia could no longer reverse. In Seattle, Chloe placed her phone inside a drawer. Then she went outside. Julian was waiting among rows of white flowers. Neither of them knew that Patricia had already decided the wedding would not remain private for long. Before the ceremony was over, thousands of strangers would know Chloe's name, but Patricia had made one mistake. She believed Chloe would respond the way she always had, with fear, with explanation, with an apology. Patricia did not know Chloe had spent 8 years keeping proof of what happened whenever the Vance family rewrote the past. Just as Chloe placed her hand in Julian's before 30 guests, a childhood photograph of her began spreading across social media. Patricia had posted it. In the picture, Chloe was about 8 years old, wearing a white dress and standing beside her mother. The little girl smiled obediently. What the photograph did not show was that Chloe had been crying minutes earlier. It did not show Patricia gripping her shoulder and warning her to stop embarrassing the family. It showed exactly what Patricia wanted people to see: a loving mother, a smiling daughter, a perfect family. The caption was only one sentence: "You raise a child into adulthood only for her to treat her own mother like a stranger one day." Then Patricia added the story around it. Her daughter had been manipulated by a man. She had secretly arranged a wedding. She had abandoned the family who sacrificed everything for her. The post spread quickly. Within an hour, thousands of people had shared it. Strangers who had never met Chloe called her ungrateful. Some found the business page for her design studio. Negative reviews appeared. Others tagged business partners and demanded to know why they worked with a woman who supposedly treated her own mother so cruelly. Patricia sat in Chicago refreshing the page again and again. Every new comment calmed her. Truth had never been as useful to Patricia as consensus. If enough people believed her version, she considered the story settled. Halfway through the reception, Sienna approached Chloe. She did not immediately hand her the phone. "Something is happening online," she said. "Do you want to know now or after tonight is over?" Chloe looked across the reception. Julian was talking to guests beneath an arch of white flowers. Music drifted across the field. For years, Patricia had been able to change the emotional temperature of any room Chloe entered, even from hundreds of miles away. Not today. "Save everything," Chloe said. "Screenshots, links, comments, everything." Sienna nodded. "And don't tell anyone else until the last song." Chloe returned to the dance floor. She kept dancing. That was the part Patricia had not planned for. She had created a storm and expected Chloe to run into the middle of it, to defend herself, to call relatives. To write angry posts Patricia could screenshot, edit, and use as evidence of how unstable her daughter had become. Chloe did none of those things. The following morning, she met Sienna and attorney Hayes at the studio. By then, Patricia's post had moved beyond family gossip. A Chicago lifestyle forum had published an article claiming Chloe had abandoned her sick mother. Several business contacts had emailed the studio asking what was happening. Patricia still believed Chloe was a small-time interior designer. She had no idea Chloe was a co-founder with authority over major projects, or that the company had legal counsel responsible for protecting its reputation. To Patricia, Chloe was still the girl whose suitcase she could throw into the rain. To Chloe's partners, she was the woman who had helped build their company from nothing. Attorney Hayes placed a folder on the conference table. Chloe looked at it. 8 years of her life sat inside. She had kept everything. A photograph of the note Patricia wrote when she forced Chloe out, messages from Marcus demanding money and implying the family might reveal private information if she refused. Voice messages from Patricia threatening to ruin the wedding. Call records stretching across years, showing that family contact often resumed only when someone needed money, influence, or Chloe's presence at an event. Sienna looked at her. "You kept all of this?" Chloe nodded. Not because she had been planning revenge. She had spent too many years being told events had happened differently than she remembered. She kept evidence because she had learned what it felt like when an entire family agreed to deny your version of your own life. Chloe had not been preparing for revenge. She had been preparing to be believed. Hayes asked one final question before acting. "Do you want us to respond?" Years earlier, Chloe might have asked what Patricia wanted. Now she answered for herself. Yes. Sienna contacted the Chicago Forum and requested an immediate correction. At first, the editorial team refused. The article was receiving significant attention. Patricia had supplied the allegations under her own name. They said they had no reason to believe she was lying. Then attorney Hayes sent a cease and desist letter. It instructed Patricia, Marcus, and the forum to stop spreading false statements, remove defamatory material, preserve all relevant records, and prepare for possible legal action if the conduct continued. He attached only a portion of Chloe's evidence. Not everything, just enough. For several hours, nothing happened. That uncertainty bothered Chloe more than she expected. The article remained online. Comments continued appearing. The studio received more messages, but Chloe did not publish a defense. She waited. That afternoon, the article disappeared. By evening, the forum had issued a correction acknowledging that the original claims had not been properly verified and confirming that available records contradicted Patricia's portrayal of Chloe leaving home voluntarily. The tone online began to change. People who had attacked Chloe started asking Patricia questions. Why had Chloe left at 20? Why did the family have threatening messages? Why had Patricia waited until the wedding to publish the accusation? The same crowd Patricia had assembled against her daughter was no longer following the script. Marcus called his mother. "Stop posting before you drag all of us into a lawsuit." Patricia did not answer. She stared at the comments. Manipulative, controlling, playing the victim. Words she had spent years applying to Chloe now sat beneath her own name. Before midnight, Patricia locked her account. Chloe closed her laptop. Outside, thin rain moved across Seattle. She stepped onto the balcony and waited for the satisfaction she once imagined revenge would bring. It never came. What she felt instead was relief. Patricia had tried to take control of the story one more time, and Chloe had finally refused to surrender it. That should have been the end. Then Hayes called. "There's something else you should see." He sent her a property record from Chicago. The family house was being listed for an urgent sale. Patricia's name was no longer on the ownership documents. The revelation did not create another battle. It explained one. The house Patricia had used for years as proof of the Vance family's success had already been lost. It had been mortgaged repeatedly to cover debts connected to Marcus's failing business and to maintain the expensive social life Patricia refused to give up. Eventually, ownership had been transferred to a property management company. Patricia had continued living there as a renter. She still posed in front of the gate, still hosted people, still allowed everyone to believe nothing had changed. It was the Vance family in physical form, expensive curtains covering cracks no one was supposed to mention. A month after the wedding, Chloe returned to Chicago for a client meeting. She almost avoided the old neighborhood entirely. Instead, when the meeting ended, she rented a car and drove there. The house looked smaller than she remembered. A sale sign stood in the yard. The paint had faded. The front steps were still there. Chloe remained inside the car for a moment. 8 years earlier, she had stood on those steps believing her entire future depended on whether the door reopened. Now she understood something she could not have understood at 20. The door had never held the power. Her need for someone behind it to choose her had. Chloe stepped through the gate. She carried a brown envelope. There was no lawsuit inside, no demand for compensation, only a copy of the legal notice instructing Patricia that any future communication had to go through Hayes. Chloe had added one handwritten sentence. "I am returning the past to you. This house no longer has any power over my life." She pushed the envelope through the mail slot, then turned around. At the end of the street, beneath the bare branches of a tree, a black car was parked. Patricia sat inside. She had learned Chloe might come by and had waited nearly an hour. When Chloe walked down the front steps, Patricia opened the car door. For a second, both women could see each other. Patricia did not call out. Neither did Chloe. Years earlier, Patricia's silence had been punishment. Now it meant nothing. Chloe did not need an apology to leave. She did not need to watch her mother cry. She did not need to list every injury or hear Patricia finally admit she had been wrong. Most of all, she did not need Patricia's failure as proof of her own success. She simply walked away. Back in Seattle, Chloe placed a wedding photograph on her desk. She and Julian stood among white flowers. The picture was imperfect. Neither was posing exactly right. Julian was looking at Chloe instead of the camera. Years earlier, Chloe had believed healing meant one day the past would stop hurting because she would forget it. Now she understood something different. Healing meant the past could still exist without being allowed to make decisions about the present. Patricia losing the house was not Chloe's victory. The internet turning against Patricia was not Chloe's victory. Even the evidence proving Chloe had told the truth was not the real victory. The victory had happened earlier. It happened when Chloe finally understood that someone being family did not give them permanent access to her life. Peace did not come when Patricia lost everything she had tried to protect. It came when Chloe realized she no longer needed anything from her. Not an invitation accepted, not an apology, not permission, not even understanding. She had already found a home. Do you think Chloe was right to cut off her entire family after what happened? Or should parents always be given one final chance because they are family? If you were standing in Chloe's place, would you have opened that door again?